Okay, are you guys able to see the screen?
English.
Okay, so let me actually.
Anvesh, if you don't mind, can you please show me how to access the localhost web page?
Sure. Yep. I'll. Right now, I'm doing that, so you guys
Okay.
can follow through. So let me copy that. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get to your project. Did you install Visual Studio Code, or did you get a chance?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, cool. So
Actually, I created two modules, like one is success and another one is failure. And
okay,
at the app.component.css, I gave the color code also.
okay, nice.
And after that, I'm not able to access the local host. I'm getting different than yours. That's why I would like to see one more time.
Sure. Yep. So yeah. So once you open your code or your folder in Visual Studio, this is the simplest way I usually do, and I also do this. So right click on it, copy path, and CD, and just paste that path. Once you're here, you can actually say ng serve, and once you do that, you should be able to. Okay, so it's already in use. Okay. Okay, and you see it's mentioning Angular Live Development Server is listening on so and so. So I just have to open that. I would copy whatever it mentions down here and paste it in your browser, and that should get you this. Are you seeing this, or are you seeing something else?
Yeah, I'm seeing something else.
Okay.
And I'm getting the same local host and path, everything. But while I'm copying that path and paste it here, and it's showing something else.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. Can you share your screen, maybe? This would be a quick one. Or let me actually multiple some participants, advanced sharing options, multiple, all participants. Okay. Now I'm letting you, giving you permission to share, so you can share and you can see that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
These are the components I created. One is success and another one is failure.
Okay.
And I gave the color code.
Mm-hmm. Compile successfully. Okay, cool.
You said we have to copy this path, right?
Yeah, just copy that.
I'm opening in my browser, like a Chrome browser.
Okay, this is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, let me view options. Can I take control?
yeah. I'll stop sharing. Okay.
No. I mean,
Oh, okay. Sorry,
you,
sorry.
can I take control of your machine? Can you give me
Is it
access?
remote controlled?
Yeah, I've just requested so you can
Okay.
accept it. And Okay, looks like I have access to that. So, uh, okay. So whatever you're doing is correct. The only thing is, once you've created that, and if you look at app.component, not this one, but .html, you see you have a lot more code in here, which we don't need initially.
Okay.
Yeah. So apart from doing that, you should also include your component, whatever you have defined here.
Okay.
Like app success in your as a tag here. So, and also your failure, right? So whatever selector name you have, so whatever you define, that is what we're using here as a tag. So whatever initially you have seen, that is what's created by default by the Angular CLI. So that is why you're seeing all of that. But now, since we have included that, you see.
Okay.
So created the components and also added those tags down here.
Okay. So basically, whatever components we created, we have to mention it in app component.html.
Yep. Right now, we are just mentioning app component HTML because in index.html, that is what we're referring to. App root. And if you want to know what is app root, if you go back to component, this is what we're defining. So whatever we define as a selector down here, we're using that as a tag. So yeah, no matter what component you create, that is what we would go. The selector name is a tag name.
Okay.
Okay. So, okay. And yeah, I can stop sharing and I can.
Yes, thanks, Anish.
Sure. Okay. So anyone else have any other questions? Did you guys?
Hi, Anish.
Hi.
Yeah, I completed the assignment, but
cool.
didn't yet signed up the GitHub account.
Okay. Yep.
So
yeah, do that.
We'll
once again.
Upload the project once I've signed up into the GitHub.
Okay, cool.
Or yeah.
So yeah, the same thing for others also. So sign up for a GitHub account. Should have done more than. So go to github.com. And maybe I should share this in what do you call it? WhatsApp. So go to that and sign up for an account. And once you do that, you can actually, right now, it may look similar to you guys as well, like in the Visual Studio Code. So it says, valid Git installation was not found. Please install Git. So I would just click on that. But open a link, so on and so forth, something like this, and get that. I recently installed my operating system, so it's the same for me as well. So anyways, so it's a simple process. So it would let you right now I'm just using all the default stuff, whatever it's selected. Okay, there are so many. But once it's done, also, okay, cool. There are also few Git extensions you can install. I'll try to find which ones are good and let you guys know, so you can just get those. But anyways, so once you do that, okay, maybe I have to restart it. So once you do that, you should be able to see something like this, and just push the, right now I will just push the changes, and it may ask you, where am I actually pushing the changes to? So just add remote. Right now, since I've already created my own GitHub account, just simply specify that. And could ask me to sign in. So are you guys following me? So just get the Git, just follow through the steps. It should be mostly straightforward. Make sure first you create the GitHub account. Once you do that, try to install it here. Anyways, right now, I don't. Any questions about this one? It should be pretty much straightforward. If you guys have any issues, you can let me know. We can go through that. Okay. Anyways, in the previous class, I was, let me, okay. The previous class, I was going through basic string interpolation. So, sorry, go ahead. Yep. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Anyways, so in the previous class, we were going through string interpolation. String interpolation is one way of sending data from our Typescript to our HTML page, right? So we define a particular variable name in the Typescript code, and I just pass that whatever down here using that double curly braces. That is what that is one way of actually using data binding, or sorry, actually sending data from our Typescript to our HTML page. So apart from that one thing, we also have something called property binding. So by the name of it, so it should be really clear what property binding is. For example, right now we have a paragraph, and I'm saying so-and-so server. Let me also open this. So if you look down here, right now I'm binding a few different properties. Server with ID 10 is so and so. So let's say I have button on here. Let's say server, okay, or add server, something simple. And these are classes defined by Bootstrap. In order to enable Bootstrap, the easiest one way is by installing. Another way would be actually just copy pasting these links. So if you want it to be local, you would install that, or I can just add these 3 different tags to our header of our index.html. That is where I would add these 3 things, and it would get out Bootstrap. Anyways, so once I do that, you can see the text looks a little different, and also the button is visible clearly. Let me go back to our servers component. Okay, so we do have different properties for buttons, right? Like one of the common thing is disabled. Okay, but whenever I say disabled, okay, if you look at this, I cannot actually click this button. But let me say I want to add, so again, whenever we are trying to do TypeScript or any other JavaScript based programming language, we're doing that to add more interaction, to add more interactivity to our web page. So right now I'm trying to change or make the disabled property more interactive. Let's say, in order to do that, I can actually create another variable down here in our, let's say, server, something simple as that, or let's define it to be false initially. Okay, so if you look down here, we have another method down here named as constructor. So what the constructor is, whenever the program Angular actually runs, and whenever you actually come to this component, whatever we have in the constructor runs first. So that is as simple as I can say. So I have a constructor. Let me try to define something down here. I have a, or let me actually go back. I'll explain using another simple example instead of going to this one. Okay, so right now the paragraph has string interpolation down here, but let's say if I want to actually give or pass a value, using property binding. Okay, earlier we are using a string interpolation, but if I want to do it using property binding, so and in property binding, let me simply say inner text equal to server value. Okay, for some reason this doesn't work. Let me go back to the previous example. Anyways, so whenever Angular component is running, it would initially come to the constructor, and this is where it tries to execute some code. Right now, I'm just having a simple thing down here, but I'll explain it later. What it's trying to do down here, though, is It's trying to change this server status from initially from false to true after 2 seconds. That is what it's trying to do. I'll explain how this code is working later on, but just what I'm trying to do down here is I'm just trying to change the server status to true from false. Okay. And here, in order to use property binding, we just have to put them in square brackets and equal to whatever property I've mentioned down here. For example, server status. And once I do that, if you see, initially the button is enabled, but after a couple seconds, I cannot actually click that. It's faded. So property binding works as I can take any property, like initially, let's say I have a disabled property, but I can, in order to assign a value for that, I simply have to put it in square brackets, and I have to mention whatever property I'm trying to assign it to. So down here, I'm trying to assign it a Boolean value, which is either true or false. So when I say Boolean equal to, initially it's false, it basically says it is not disabled initially when the program loads, when the web browser loads, but after a couple seconds, I'm changing the server status to true. In this case, I'm simply saying disabled equal to true. That is what property binding is. Property binding as string interpolation is, I would simply mention 2 curly braces and I would mention the name of the property, like for example, server status. Okay. In other case, when I have a property binding, I would take any property. It can be, let's say, style. Okay. I can also change the value of that. I can say simply style equal to so and so, right? Usually this is how I would define. But if I want to use property binding on this one, I would simply put square brackets equal to and whatever value I have down here. Is that clear? Is that any confusion?
Little confused, Anvesh. Can you explain?
Sure. So so you understood how we are doing the string interpolation, right? This thing is clear.
Yes, Anvesh.
Okay. So this is when I just want to display some value, right? Like for example, in our down here, if I'm just trying to get value from our TypeScript, right? Like server ID or server status to HTML. This is how I would define. But sometimes I just don't want to display some text, right? I also want to change a property, whatever. For example, if I have a paragraph, I have a property for style, right? This is one property. I can also have other properties like, for example, ID. ID is another property. I have several other properties which I may want to change. So if I want to change the actual property of a particular HTML tag, that is when I would use a property binding. In the example I'm showing down here, the button, initially, if I simply say disabled is a property, right? Disabled is a property. Whenever I put disabled, it doesn't let me click on that button, okay? But I don't want that to be static. I want that to be dynamic. So I want that to be dynamic. And what I'm trying to do is in simple servers.component.ts, I just want to the disabled to be changed. Okay. I initially want that to be enabled, but after 2 seconds, I want that to be disabled. In order to do that, I want to assign some property, whatever I've defined here, some value I've defined here. I'm trying to assign it to this property. whatever I've defined here, it is a variable down here. I'm trying to assign this variable value to a property, whatever we have in the HTML page. So property binding, in simple words, I'm trying to change the value of a property or attribute in our case, whatever. Either, anyways, attribute or property. In this case, I'm trying to change the property called disabled. When I say disabled, simply it would just be disabled, but here I'm trying to change the value of that particular property from initially from false to true. So initially I want to show that, but later on I don't want to. Or simply, let's say, for first 2 seconds, I don't want to enable it. Okay. So when I do this, it's simply saying, it's directly taking that here. Let's say it's saying it's true. Okay, that is as simple as it can be. But I don't want to be static, so I'm just passing this value to here. So initially it's disabled, but after a couple of seconds, you can see it's enabled. Is it still not clear? Or
I'm good now.
okay. Let me show that using a different example in the text. And trying to find a simple example. Inner text equal to. Anyways, I'll go through a few other examples. You can actually see what is going on. So as of now, we have seen how to pass data from our, so there are different ways of sharing data between different components, like let's have HTML. Down here, I've shown you string interpolation and also property binding. And if I want, sorry, this is the other way around. From TypeScript to HTML. So if I want to transfer something from HTML to or TypeScript, I would use something called event binding. So event binding is whenever I do something in the HTML page, I want to transfer some value to our TypeScript. Okay, that is what event binding is. So let's say I have our button down here. And whenever I click on that button, I want something else to happen. Okay. So in order to do that, so whenever you have a button, what is the one thing you would commonly do? You would try to click on it, right? So if I'm trying to define it using JavaScript or something, I would say simply on click. Okay. But since we are using Angular, I wouldn't actually use on click, but I would use something called click. So whenever it simply says whenever I'm trying to click, and it would be between these braces, square, not square, curved braces. And I'm saying whenever I click on this, something should happen. Okay. And something should happen, and I would actually define what needs to happen in our TypeScript. So I would define, I'm trying to click down here, and down here in our TypeScript, this is where I would define what needs to happen. For example, let's say I have another server name equal to okay. Simply, I'm defining a string called server name. And once I click on here, let's say I want to display that server name. Okay. In order to display, again, I'm trying to use our string interpolation, and I would want to show this server name down here. Whatever, let me also add another thing down here. Input type equal to, let's say, text. So I'm trying to use another bootstrap class, which is a form control. Anyways, and whenever, so for example, similar to whatever we have in click, when one of the main events. So let me go back. Let me explain a simple example. So let's say, do you guys know what events are? Did I explain it to you guys before? Anything about events?
No,
Events?
no.
Or okay. So events are, let's say, let me take a simple example. Let's say I have a car, right? Car has different properties, right? Like it has a name, okay? It has a color or a model, so on and so forth, okay? Apart from, so these are what do you call it? How it appears, right? The properties down here, whatever I'm displaying here. Name, color, or model, or a few other things. I can also have, anyways, apart from just properties, a car can also have like an event, right? Like event means what happens when I hit on an accelerator, right? So, or what happens when I hit on a brake. So events are, like in simple terms, I can define it as whenever you're trying to
Actions.
do some, yeah, actions, in simple terms, actions. So whenever I'm trying to do something, what can actually happen, like an action. So if I'm hitting on a brake, the car comes to a halt. If I'm hitting on accelerator, it goes. And if I'm trying to, so in simple terms, whatever change is defined by an event. Similar to that, for a button, you have an event, like a click event. Also, you have for input text, you have an event where whenever I say input, it simply says whenever something changes in the input, what needs to be done. That is what input event is here. So click is an event, and this is how I would define it in Angular. I would simply say click, okay, with braces down here, equal to, and whatever I want to do. And here, or I can also, for a text box, any text box, not just this one, I want to, whenever I try to type, right? I just want to, for example, even down here in Google, you have this text box. Whenever I try to type something, something changes in the below, right? So for in simple terms, a text box, you would want to know what changes. So for that, I'm defining a input. Okay. In order to know what changes in Angular, you have something called input. And in order to access that, okay, I would define what event I'm having here, but I would define how to execute that or make changes in our Typescript. So in here, I've defined this is how this is what I'm trying to do. Like I want to understand or do something whenever the text changes in Typescript. I would usually define a function. Okay, like for example, on usually all the events are this is a naming convention again, starts with a on. Okay, whenever I'm defining a function, I would simply say on. For example, input text change. Okay, this is how I would define a function. Are you guys familiar? I think Lakshmi is familiar, but others, are you guys familiar with what functions are? What they do? And okay, yes, you are. So in function, I can, sorry, go ahead.
Whenever whenever there was a call for a particular function, it comes to that particular function and do its job and gives the result.
Yep. So yeah, that's right. So whenever something changes, we want to know, we want to do something else with that. So that is what the functions are for. So in here, I have, I'm defining on input text changed. So if I define that here, and I would also say when I'm changing something here, this is what I want to call. Okay. Are you guys with me so far? Okay.
Yes.
So okay. So I'm saying when a text change is happening, I want to go to this function. So that is what I'm defining here. Okay. Apart from all of that, there is a directive or a simple directive in Angular, which is called event. Okay. Whenever I say $sign event, okay, remember this. Defines what all about the current, tag or element. Okay. So when I say $sign event, this is particular for Angular. Whenever I say $sign event, and I also have to mention that here. Okay. Whenever I say $sign event, it gets all the things about this current element. I will show you in a bit what does that mean. So I would simply say event and any. Another thing I want you guys to remember is whenever I want to see, let me show you event. Okay. Okay. So far, I've defined a input text change event, and I've defined a function in here in Angular. Okay. Let's see how it actually. Where do I have my? Okay, it's probably complaining about something. Okay, so it's click I have clicked, but I haven't done anything. Let me remove that. Okay. Okay. So, so whenever I change something down here, like let's say text is here. Okay, if I open F12, in console, okay, since I'm saying console.log, so I'm saying console is whatever you're seeing down here. It says console here, right? This can be helpful for debugging. So whenever you're programming and you want to see some changes about your particular code, you can actually do that. I would simply say console, and I'm saying .log. Log means just output whatever I'm trying to do. Let's say I try and say console.log. Let's say I want to put a simple value 4. Okay, so let us see how that. So I'm changing something in here, and you see the value 4 is printed. So in simple terms, I'm trying to print a value in the console tab down here. This can be helpful. I'm trying to put a 4 down here, but in the future, if you want to, if you're trying to debug something, and this is really helpful. And anyways, so in simple terms, console.log is nothing but printing it in your console window down here. Okay. And right now, instead of printing 4, I just want to know more about event. Okay, I would simply say event. Let me save it. And let me refresh it down here. And let's say I'm typing test. Okay. You see, it automatically printed everything, whatever data is being passed down here. And also, apart from that, you can also see where is value? Value. Okay, I've typed test here, and you see it's actually reflected down here. Okay, if I say test is, okay, you can also see that the value of that particular event, and target, and a value for that is test is, right, down here. So what I'm trying to say is, whenever I'm typing something in my HTML page, I'm actually able to capture that in the TypeScript using, you know, the onChange input event, and actually defining a function here. But just in outputting it, like just showing it on a console is isn't that useful, right? You want to do more than just doing that here. In order to do that, let me actually create another variable. Let's say I have a server name down here, and paragraph, and okay, or I can simply use this one. So whatever I'm trying to type here, I just want to show it in down below, down here. Okay, like it's a server name. So in order to do that, you guys have seen down here. So same server 1. Okay, server 1 is nothing but it's an event, and within event there is something called target, and within target I have value, right, down here. In order to access that in our TypeScript, that is what we would exactly do. So the top part is event. Within that, I have a target. Within that, I have a value. So in other terms, it would be event. In order to access a property, I would simply put a dot. Okay. Once I put a dot, I can actually access whatever properties it has. in here, I have a property called target. Okay, I would say, so that is what target is, dot. So whenever I say dot, I can access any properties within that event. Okay, for that particular event down here, I have target, and within that target, I have dot value. So that is what I'm trying to access. And I want to assign that to server name. So I would simply say this dot server name equal to. And once I do that, let's go back to our HTML page and say test server. And you can see it's actually whatever I'm typing in here, it's showing down here. Do you guys have any questions? It may be somewhat confusing. So if you have any questions, let me know. I would try to explain. Lakshmi or Srilata?
No one will.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so that is what we're trying to do. So I've defined the particular variable here, but I'm trying to bring that down here. So anyways, so this is what event binding is. Event binding is I'm trying to do something in here, like a event in here, like a click event. Okay, it can be different events. It can be click, or it can be input. And for every tag, there might be a different event. So you can actually Google that. Like for example, if I want to know what are different events for a button, okay, and I would simply say Angular, and you can actually find out the different events. Like for example, click is one of the most popular event which you would be doing whenever you click on a button. But apart from that, let me show you. So if I simply say on, you can see all the events available for that. Okay, I can click on it. I can, some people want to drag a button, I want to just focus. Focus is whenever I'm trying to put my mouse, or whenever I'm trying to get focus on that particular, or whenever I press my key. So there are so many events for every single, HTML tag. And depending on your situation, you may want to use that. But the basic concept is same. So I would define what event I'm trying to bind that. I would simply say what event for that particular event, what I want to do in our TypeScript. And that is what I'm trying to do. So that is what event binding is in Angular. So apart from these two, there is also something simple, another type of binding or another type of communication. It's called two-way binding. Two-way binding is whatever value I have in HTML or TypeScript, it would be the same. It would change at the same time. Okay. Two-way binding can be specified as. So in the first case, I'm trying to transfer values from TypeScript to HTML, that is string interpolation or property binding. Whenever I'm trying to transfer values from HTML to TypeScript, that is event binding. Two-way binding is both of them communicating together, HTML and TypeScript communicates at the same time. Okay. I'll show you how is that useful, or when would we actually use that. So I have input exchange down here. Okay, let me leave that. Let me create server name. Let's say 1. And in order to use two-way binding in our HTML, I would combine both property binding, which is square brackets, and also event binding, which is curved brackets. So I would do both. Since I'm doing two-way binding, I'm combining both. And there is a directive in or Angular. It's called ng model. Okay. And I would simply specify what value I'm trying to bind in both the places. Let's say I want to bind server name. So I would simply specify that. Okay, as simple as that. So I would combine property binding and also event binding. ng model is how we are trying to do the two-way binding in Angular. Anyways, let us say type equal to text. And also I want to use the bootstrap class form control. Okay. And in order to see how the value is changing, let me also use string interpolation down to show the value changed on fly. So earlier I had to register for an event, create a particular method, pass this value, and access those values properties. This is all I've done. But now I'm just simply saying ng model equal to whatever the name of the property there, and I'm trying to show it here. That is all I'm trying to do. Let us see how it works. So I have another text box here. Let me say test server. So I'm not changing anything. I haven't done anything special down here. Just saying ng model and equal to, and this. That is as simple as it can get. So if I'm trying to communicate between both TypeScript and HTML, this is how I would do. So what happened here is whenever I said ng model, it's changing value here. It's transferring that to down here. Okay. And in return, it is also updating the string interpolation value down here to server name one. So that is what is happening. And this is the previous text, and you can see this is the first form control, and this is the second one. And you might be wondering what are these things down here? These are like underscore ng context bxt C46. This is what Angular is actually creating in the background automatically. This is not what we're trying to do, but this is what Angular is doing in order to, do its functionality. Any questions about any of these? Okay. So, as I mentioned, there are all these bindings or these ways of communication. And finally, two-way binding. So this is how you would mostly communicate between Angular and HTML. Most popular is the ng model because you can communicate, at the same time between those two. But from time to time, you might be using string interpolation or property binding. Okay. And do you guys? Another thing I want to mention is whenever I'm trying to use string interpolation, okay, I only use it for like inner text, like in between these two tags. This is, we also call this as inner text, or just simply to show some value down any other place, right? Right down here. So that is when I would use string interpolation. I wouldn't actually combine that with a property binding. This is not this. If I do this one, it wouldn't actually be able to understand. So don't try to mix up both of those two things. So whenever you have property binding, don't try to use curly braces. I mean, people may get confused when you're trying to use both of them. So that is why I'm mentioning. But yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we do have different types of bindings, and apart from this, in Angular you have something called directives. Angular directives. So one of the directives we've already seen, which is ng model. Okay. These directives help us to use, or let me go through this one so you would understand. So we have ng model. Apart from that, there are a few other basic directives in Angular. Let's say let me create an event down here. Okay, let's say on server created. And since we have defined it down here, we should also define it in our Typescript. And also let me define a Boolean down here. Server created. So there are different ways of defining variables again. I can simply say the variable name, colon. I would define what type it is, equal to false. But Angular has shorthand notations as well. I don't have to define all of this. I can simply say false, and it would automatically assume that it's a Boolean. So just like a side note. So let's say server created. And another thing you guys may be noticing is whenever I'm trying to access a particular variable, right, within a function, I'm mentioning this. So whenever I say this, it actually means this class. Okay. So if I don't say this, if I forget to use this, it is actually comparing. So it says it doesn't find the name, server name. So always remember, if you have defined something globally, which is available to every function, just mention, don't forget to use this dot. And that is how we should, that is how we access different variables or properties. Anyways, coming back to this function, server created equal to true. So what I want to do is whenever I click, whenever I try to enter a name down here and click on this button, like I want to say a particular server is created with so-and-so name. That is all I want to do, okay? So down here, I want to enter a name like server name 1, okay? I want to do that. And I want to add server. Once I do that, I want to display some text below saying so-and-so server is created, okay? So, but before that, I don't want to show anything. So in order to do that, I would use a directive called ngIf, okay? Star, okay, ngIf. So there are different types of directives in Angular. ngIf is a structural directive. Okay, what is a structural directive name, right? So structural directive, why are these so small? Okay, structural directive means it changes the actual structure of the HTML page. So it tries to change something within the HTML page. And in order to define a structural directive, I always use a star. Okay, so I would simply say star ng if, okay, this is how I would use a directive, and equal to, and I would define whatever property I've defined here. So before clicking on the button, right? Okay, before clicking on that, the server created value is false, server created equal to false. But once I click on the button, see, on clicking this button, I've defined a function on server created. On server created, I'm changing that value to true. Okay, so I'm trying to use ngIf down here. Okay, trying to access a variable down in our HTML page. And I'm simply saying in paragraph here, I would say server is created or was created. And I want to also specify the name of the server, and server name is, and you know, whatever I've defined down here. So let me remove that from there and just show it down here. So are you guys with me so far? Any questions? Okay, so let me save and go down here and have too much code down here. Let me remove this for now, just to make things clear. Okay. Okay. So I'm trying to type the server name. And once I do that, it shows us. So what ngIf is, whenever this is equal to true, ngIf this is true, I need to pass a Boolean down here. So another thing I want to mention is I should pass a Boolean. Can either be true or false. Whenever this value is true, ngIf equal to true, it shows whatever content is between the tags. Whenever this is false, okay, it just doesn't show. In other terms, initially the server status is false, so it wasn't showing that, but later on it is true, so it is showing that. So let us refresh it. You can also check that in our elements. And down here, we are only seeing, you know, input, then we are seeing a button, right? It doesn't actually show us this paragraph. You don't see a paragraph in our elements. It says I have a binding, and it says I have a if, but it doesn't say what I'm trying to show. So that is what so initially it doesn't even add it. It just isn't there whenever it's false. But now let's say I'm saying test server name one, and when I click on add server, you see it added that particular paragraph down here, and it's also saying the binding if equal to true. So this is one of the other what do you call Angular directives. So any questions regarding what this is for? ngif. Okay. So apart from ngif, so whenever this is true, okay, I'm trying to show, but I want to do something else whenever that is false. Okay. So how would I do that? So when this is true, this is what I want to do. But when it's false, I want to do something else. So in order to do that, again, I would create another variable down here. Again, that should be a Boolean, but there is a simpler way of doing it. Let me show you. So there is another Angular tag. It's called ng template. ng template defines this is something which is related to Angular. Whenever I say ng template, it says this is where I'm trying to use something related to Angular. And here I would define the name for that. So in order to define a name for any, not just ng template, for any particular tag using Angular. Okay, using HTML, I would simply say ID equal to so and so, right? Like a P1 or something. Okay, then I can access in our TypeScript using P1. But in Angular, in order to define an ID, there is a simpler way. I would simply say hash and the name of that particular thing, whatever element or tag it is. So hash P1 means I'm saying the ID of this P is P1. Okay. Coming back to our ng template, in order to define an ID, I would simply say hash, and I would simply define that template to have a name of no server. Okay. And let me define a simple paragraph in here, and I would say no server was created. Okay. And in order to, okay, when this is true, okay, whenever ng is equal to true, I want to show this. But when it is false, I want to do something else. So in order to do that, I would simply say semicolon else. I want to display no server. That is as simple as it is. So I would define a template. Within that template, I would give it a name like no server or anything else. And within that, I can define whatever content I want. In this case, I'm displaying a simple paragraph, but I can show anything. So that is how I would access. So ngif equal to true, okay, it would show this. Ngif else, if this is not true, I would show something else. And that something else is ng template. This is what I've defined here. Any questions? Is this confusing, or do you guys, is this clear so far?
This is I'm good at ngif, but I'm little confused about event binding and the two-way binding. Two-way binding also it is good, but event binding, even if you are doing that, it displaying once you enter the text, it displaying down also, right?
Right now I'm trying to display it down here.
Okay.
Yeah. In my case, in our case, I'm trying to do more than one thing. So that is why it may be confusing. But in event binding, so I'm saying input, right? So whenever I say input, it says whenever the input changes. Okay. In terms of text, okay, that is the actual text, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is define a particular function, right, down here.
Yeah.
Whatever, let's say, in simple events, right? Like for a car example, when I'm trying to press the pedal for the brake, what happens? Tries to come to a halt, right?
Yeah.
In similar terms, whenever some text changes here, I'm trying to do something else. So I don't want to do nothing, right? Like, for example, even in terms of Google, when I open the home page, when I type in something like, let's say Bluetooth, see, it automatically changes based on whatever text I'm typing here, right?
Yeah.
Similar to that, whenever the text is changing down here, I'm saying I want to call this particular function, and I'm defining that function in my TypeScript. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can do anything down here. I don't have to just display it down here. I'm displaying it here just to say whatever I'm changing. Usually you don't just display whatever you're trying to type, but you may want to do something else. In our case, I'm just displaying it by using our string interpolation, using the server name.
Okay.
Yeah. So is this clear? Is this still confusing?
Okay. For event binding, you're using the function and
Mm-hmm.
and
In the function, I'm
string interpolation.
mm-hmm.
Using both of them in the event binding and displaying
it here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
two-way binding, you're just using the ng model.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is as simple as it can get. As you can see in here, I'm trying to use create a event, or trying to tap in an event and create a function down here and change something here. But in two-way binding, all I have to define is ng model. I have to say
it
ng
won't
model.
it won't go to that function and nothing. Only it uses the ng model.
Yeah, and whenever I'm saying ng model, it automatically communicates between TypeScript and HTML page at the same time. Whenever something changes in TypeScript, that changes in HTML, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. So if you want to check, initially I'm saying server name equal to empty, right? I don't have to do that. I can also say server name 1. Okay. When I do that, since I'm defining it here, it automatically communicates to the HTML, the input type equal to text, and it will display it in our, once I find our, see, it's, I didn't even type in anything, but you can see it automatically transmitted to down here, since I'm using ng model. So ng model is both using our property. It changes the property, and also it changes the event. It communicates like an event. So that is why it's called two-way binding.
Okay.
And that you can also see that obviously in the syntax. If you see, for property binding, I'm using a square bracket. For event binding, I'm using this one. And in case of two-way binding, I'm combining both of them, and I'm saying ng model.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other question regarding ngF? This is clear, right?
Yeah, that one is clear.
Okay, cool. Okay, so there are different sort of attributes. And you guys, if you have any other questions in between, you can always ask me. I will try to explain it. So ngF is a structural directive. And as you can see, it actually changed the structure of our HTML tag or HTML page. And you can also see that it doesn't even show it down here. Anyways, so in here, I'm saying when I click this button, I want to change the server created to true. Okay. And when I click on that one, you see it no longer shows no server was created, but it shows server was created and server name. Okay. So, okay. So that is one of the Angular directives. There are a couple others. And let me, okay. So I have ngif, and also else, right? Else is where I want to do that. There is also something called ng style. Where am I? Okay. So ngif is a structural directive, but ng style is an attribute directive. I'm saying this is an attribute directive or a property directive because I can actually use it as an attribute. So let us go back to our previous example. Okay. And here, let me remove that. In a paragraph, okay. So by the name of it, you can actually say what this is, right? ng style. So it actually can be used for styling our document. Okay. And in order to do that, since this is an attribute sort of directive, I would use the square brackets. I would simply say ng style, okay, equal to. And you may ask me a simple question like, when I have a style, right, I simply can define anything down here. Like if I want the background color to be aquamarine, I can actually do it here, right? What is the use of ng style? So again, basically, we're doing everything in Angular or using Angular or TypeScript because we want that to be dynamic. So depending on some other value, I want to change something else in here. So in order to do that, I'm using a ng style. I'll show you in a second how we can actually implement that. So let's say in our TypeScript, let me define another function. Let's say get color. So I want to define the background color for that. And okay, I don't have a constructor. Let me create one here. For this example, I want to use a constructor. Again, the constructor is what actually executes when the Angular component loads. So whenever this particular HTML page loads and whenever it is calling this Angular component, it first goes to the constructor, does whatever is in here. Okay. So let me create a simple variable called server status, which is a string, and let me define it as a offline, or maybe I already have defined it. Okay. In constructor, let me do one thing. Let me change this value of server status, okay, based on a random value. I'll explain this one thing and we can. Or yes, do you guys want me to continue this or should I continue it tomorrow? It's up to you guys. Anyone?
Maybe tomorrow, Anish.
Okay. Yeah, there are too many things today I've gone through. So you may need some time to practice. So I would just stop here. So there are a few other directives. I would explain about them in tomorrow's class. But yeah, so I will send you guys the assignment in WhatsApp. I haven't decided what I want to give. It would be something based on our communication between HTML and TypeScript, and maybe one. Yeah, I would just concentrate on this one today for the assignment. In tomorrow's class, I would go through all the directives, and just to keep things simple and easy for you guys to understand. Anyways, so to wrap up, we just go through the concepts again. So there are different ways of communication. One is string interpolation using curly braces, double curly braces. That is a simple way of communication. So I will define a TypeScript variable down here. And in order to communicate that back to HTML, I would simply put in curly braces and mention whatever the variable name is. So that is as simple as it can get. And there is another way of communicating using a property binding. In order to use property binding, I can use this for any attribute I can actually have in a HTML tag. In order to use that, I would just define or put square brackets around it. In this case, I'm using disabled, but I can use it pretty much for everything. For example, if I want to change the class name, I can simply put this one around that and equal to whatever value I've defined in the TypeScript. Okay, and I can define a class here, new class name equal to, let's say, blue. Okay, I can do pretty much anything. That is what I'm saying. I don't actually have to use just for the disabled. I can use it for any other property. And in order to do that, I just have to have a square brackets and equal to the property name in the TypeScript. Okay, so those are two ways of communicating from TypeScript to HTML. But to communicate from HTML, so we are communicating from HTML to TypeScript is whenever we have events. Again, events there are plenty of events. And depending on the particular input element, the events can change. And for a button, usually it's a click, but it can be, again, I can have any of these. In order to know how to actually use that in Angular, I would just ask you to Google, depending on your situation, just Google, okay, for a click, how should I define the event? Anyways, so I would define the event here in order to do something in, again, we are trying to communicate from the HTML page to the TypeScript. So I would also define a function in the TypeScript, and I would trying to do something there. Okay. Apart from those two, the simplest is two-way binding. In order to use two-way binding, I would combine both property binding and also event binding. And I would simply specify ng model equal to the property name. Okay. Any questions so far? Is this all clear? Okay. I will send you guys the assignment through WhatsApp, and I want you guys to create the GitHub account, okay? And please, once you create, I'm asking you to create that, create it as a private, for example, GitHub. Okay, this is my own GitHub account. When I go there, there is only one, public one. So anyone can actually look at this one, okay? But apart from that, I also have others created. You see, I have a home page, web page, and all of these. These are my own, these are private. So you can either create a public or a private. I would say it's up to you guys. You can create a public or a private one. But once you do that, share it with me so I can look at your assignments whenever you do it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow then. Bye. Good night.
Yeah. Good night, Anush.
Good night.
Good night.